And I think
Hello.
we're just fantastic. We're all here. Well, so now that we have you all, I just wanted to I will do a proper introduction. So today we have Alison, who is a partner at French and Fenech Advocates and heads the Yachting Department. She also works within the Marine Litigation Department. Alison obtained her master's degree in International Maritime Law from the International Maritime Law Institute in 2005, and after which she joined French and Fenech Advocates in 2006. For the past 14 years, she has advised and coordinated projects for owners and financiers relating to the acquisition and sale of private and commercial yachts, with regards to registration, financing, chartering, leasing, and fiscal requirements and solutions. Next, we have Janet Santopoulos, who hopefully I haven't butchered her name, but is head of Marine and Aviation at Rosemont Yachting Services. Janet has an international background and graduated at the University of Aix-Marseille III. She has my master's in international and European and maritime law since 2001. Janet has gained significant work experience in the yachting sector, especially in Europe and recently in Asia, and heads up the yachting department of 2 other Luxembourg and Monaco-based companies. And then finally, we have Carla, who's a partner at Piana Iluzzi Culolo Treboni. Sorry. Clara started working with the firm in 1990, chartered accountant, registered in Genoa Association of Certified Chartered Accountants since 1992, registered with the Board of Legal Auditors since 1995, and a partner of the firm since 1998. Areas of expertise are corporate advice on tax and commercial law, and particularly VAT, shipping and pleasure craft sector, tax disputes, and assistance in measures to avoid tax litigation, corporate finance, international tax planning, and transfer price. So as you can see, a lot of specialties there. So now with that introduction done, I'm going to hand it over to Alison to take this panel away.
So thank you, John. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you, John and Andrea, for organizing this online webinar. And obviously, one of the things I personally missed most this year because of this surreal situation that we find ourselves in is definitely the physical seminar ahead of the boat show. So we are very grateful that Marine Money have organized this, definitely the next best thing and what can bring us together in this situation. But I think we've certainly learned how important our yearly appointments are to keep us together as an industry. I would like to say also that I've seen a lot of familiar faces signing up for this webinar. So thank you for the support. And again, I hope you are all keeping as well as possible at the moment. Obviously, the reason behind this panel is that there is always a tax panel of sorts during Marine Money throughout the years we've been participating. And we felt that it would be of interest to you to see whether there have been any updates in our jurisdictions. Now, obviously, time is limited. We couldn't include more jurisdictions than we have, but we're lucky enough to have Janet and Carla to cover France, Italy, and Monaco. And of course, I will pitch in on the Malta side as and when needed. The focus, of course, has been COVID. And as you know, there has been a lot of updates throughout these months on what measures governments have been taking to mitigate the virus. I think undoubtedly, as we are all experiencing, we are unfortunately facing a second wave in Europe, and it's all hitting us at the same time. And with it, obviously, governments have started again after relaxing measures during the summer months, are gradually or very suddenly, in some cases, starting to reintroduce new measures. And we felt that perhaps it might make most sense to start with touching on that subject and to see really, given that we are all very hands-on practitioners, for those who know us, and we depend and deal with the entry and the departure of yachts from our jurisdictions to carry out the various procedures that we assist with, it might be worthwhile to touch base now that we are at this stage of this global journey, let's call it. So Janet, we were just having a chat before we started. Is there anything that you feel might affect your practice over the coming months in France and Monaco? You're mentioning a possible lockdown perhaps, so I'll just leave it to you to guide us.
Well, the thing is that I think, as you said, we are facing a second phase, and there's no really exception for Monaco and France. There's a curfew which has been installed since last Saturday in south of France, so and in other regions as well, but mainly south of France. Not yet in Monaco, but curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. In Monaco, restaurants or bars are closing at 11:30. You need to reserve, and of course there are other sanitary measures that are in place in order to prevent the spread of the virus and enhance actually social distancing. As we speak today, there's a defense council in Paris. Tomorrow there will be a second one. So we hear more and more rumors that probably there will be new lockdown restrictions announced starting from tomorrow. We don't know yet what's going to happen. Then, I mean, they need to balance actually the health with the economy. And so I don't think that it will be as radical as it was in March. But still, I think that, well, we'll have some new announcements starting from tomorrow. You and I participated to several seminars in order to update the yachting industry about the impacts of COVID since March. Well, as far as yachts are concerned, and since June, there's no real changes in Monaco and France. So the borders are opened to EU citizens and to yachts coming from abroad without any quarantine. So boats can come in the port, can leave the port, can circulate and can navigate around. The thing, of course, there are still some obligations, meaning that yachts need to make a maritime health declaration 48 hours prior to arrival in the port, to the maritime police, to the coast guards. They need, of course, to contact a specific number, and there's some specific protocols to follow on if there's a suspicion of COVID cases on board. So this is really the obligation right now. And of course, aside from that, there are a lot of measures to respect, like avoid close contacts, respect social distancing, even on board. I mean, proper sanitation of the vessels, obligation to put hand and surface sanitizer at the disposal of people on board, to test actually the crew often. Now there's still an obligation to test the people joining yachts, but coming from non-Schengen areas. But for that, there's not compulsory actually to test everybody on board, but it's good things to have. And most of the marinas now, probably all the marinas, have some specific guides, actually best practice guides is in place, so that need to be adhered to. So this is the updates I can give you, but I think we'll have more announcements to make starting from, I mean, towards the end of the week.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Janet. Carla, Italy.
For Italy, the situation, as in the other countries, is evolving depending on the evolution of the health emergency. And talking about yachts, we must consider two levels of regulation, and one is coming from the general rules established by the government for the movement between states, and the other one is decided by the Minister of Infrastructures and Transports, stating the specific rules on to be kept on board. With regards to the general rules, as almost all countries did, Italy has divided the other countries in 6 groups, varying depending on the greater or lesser freedom in the movement of people. And there is one first group of countries with no limitations, and the last group includes countries with prohibition to enter into Italy at present, where the other groups have increasing levels of precautions, such as the negative result in the COVID-19 test and or quarantine periods before the free movement in the country. And these are the general rules that have a quite frequent update from the government and that we expect to change depending on the health emergency in the next days. With regards to the specific market, we had some rules given by the Ministry of Infrastructures and Transports, and these rules date from the beginning of the summer, but they are still valid for the market, and they require sanitation for each use of the yacht and new sanitation periodical of all the premises of the yacht. They include appropriate information to the crew and to the guests, of course, about the risks and the necessary prevention measures. The obligation for the crew to use masks and gloves and protective eyes according to the type of the new unit in specific phases of the navigation or mooring, unmooring, bunkering, and so on. And about the obligation to submit preventive, before boarding and periodic COVID-19 tests, they were required only for people in charge of the first aid measures. And there is the need to repeat this test to be sure that people needing to touch the other people are not positive for the COVID. The crew must take care to prevent access to strangers on board, and only people living in the same house may stay in the same cabin. They can share the same accommodation in the yacht. These we expect to have further updates about these rules, but until the ministry issues new regulations, these are the only guidelines we have specific for yachts. What I can recommend in this situation, as there can be some doubts for specific situation, and the reaction from the government, depending on the evolution of the health emergency, are not foreseeable, is to raise specific questions to be dealt with on a specific case-by-case basis. For example, last summer we had the problem, a question from yachts carrying on board more than 12 passengers, and some local harbor masters questioned about their right to navigate with their guests while the cruise ships were not allowed to travel. Through a specific action carried on with the support of Federagenti, we could clarify with the central harbor master that these yachts were allowed to navigate with more than 12 guests on board, so avoiding misinterpretation from the local harbor masters. And we believe that this approach must be considered every time we have specific doubts in what we can or we cannot do with yachts in this difficult and evolving situation.
Okay, thank you, Carla, for that. Obviously, it's clear that things are changing all the time, and we can only, as Janet said, we were giving updates regularly since March, and then we sort of gave up because we realized that whatever we're saying one week might be redundant the next. But at this moment in time, in Malta, the airport and the travel restrictions were lifted, as all other jurisdictions, roughly around June. Since then, unfortunately, as with all of Europe, cases have gone up, and with that, a number of restrictions were reintroduced depending on the specific country. So countries have been categorized into three categories. the red list, from where no travel would be allowed unless the person coming from one of those countries would have spent at least 2 weeks in a safe corridor country and undergone a negative COVID test. There is an amber list, which includes countries from where crew, in our case, would be required to produce a negative swab test within at least 72 hours before arrival. And then there is the green list, which is basically without any restrictions. Obviously, the authorities always have the discretion of requesting whoever is on the island coming from these countries to undergo a test, regardless of the list, whether if they are entering. And as a Chamber of Commerce, we have also, over the past months, been working very hard to come up with best practices with the authorities to, of course, as an industry, highlight the fact that we have an interest to ensure that we're protecting our crew and our captains and our boats and our owners, while at the same time allowing the various services that we offer to continue. So even though swab tests would not strictly be required if the crew are all coming from a safe corridor, we know as a fact that a large number of agents would still carry out swabs on crew on arrival in Malta. And I believe that is really, especially now, the best way to go, both for the crew and also for, of course, the general population where the crew would be mingling with. Well, hopefully not mingling too much, obviously, at the moment. In fact, there is mandatory wearing of masks in all places, as from a few days ago. And also the government only yesterday announced the closure of bars, whereas restaurants can still operate, but there are again social distancing measures, etc. So yes, we are living as well in very particular parameters. It is not affecting the clearance of yachts. In fact, I must say that the past month and a half have been exceptionally busy for the islands, because the fact that there was a lifting of some of the measures meant that a number of yachts that were unable perhaps to be delivered or be processed could now come in at one go. So it was, of course, it led to a late season in a way, because we had to deal with that later on than we're used to. But all of this within the necessary health protocols. The good thing about yachting is that it can be controlled, right? We're dealing with a limited number of crew, a limited number of boats, so we can apply all these measures as we go along. So I think the best piece of advice, ladies, is that whoever is coming into the island needs to check with the health authorities, needs to check with the agents, make sure that all the health declarations are being filled in, and all the crew have checked, of course, their origin and what they need to do to avoid any delays. The second subject that we thought, of course, would swiftly follow COVID would, of course, be VAT. And Janet, I and Carlo would not be sitting on a panel unless we mentioned VAT and tax. So not us to disappoint anyone. Leaving all of this COVID, again, surreal situation that we are handling aside, and going back to normal modus operandi, definitely all of us practitioners in the industry over the past months have been receiving a number of updates on VAT on charters. You know, the famous application of reduced VAT, of use and enjoyment on charters, what will happen. I mean, a lot of this argument has again been set aside because of what is happening around us globally, which is very serious. But I personally predict that this is definitely a subject that we all need to keep an eye on over the next weeks, months, and if not year. When we hopefully soon meet again, it will be one of the main subjects we're discussing. And because of all this data that's been sent, definitely we've decided that it's something we need to discuss. So perhaps, Janet, would you like to open the floor on VAT on charters in France? What is happening?
I suggest that Carla starts, because I think that for news in Italy rather than in France, we have some official news, even though we have some hints. And just a small thing. I mean, when I mentioned that nothing has changing since June actually for yachts arriving, of course, from people arriving by air, we have some similar restrictions than the one you mentioned for Malta, this of course. But by sea, actually, the limitation and the test is just from people arriving from non-Schengen countries.
I understand. So there's a distinction.
Okay. In Italy, I underline that some countries within the Schengen area, due to the percentages and the result of the COVID-19 emergency in those countries, need the test to enter to Italy. So, for example, Spain needs the negative COVID test unless the person coming from Spain stays in Italy and undergoes the test in Italy.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the.
This is something that recently changed.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Just going back.
Carla, you've been invited to open the floor on VAT on Charter. So.
I know that this topic is on me, as in Italy we had this year many news and the news of the news and so on. Just starting from the very beginning, we all know that a large part of the VAT news we are facing in the countries that are, we could say, traditionally allowing a reduction of the tax basis and of the tax burden, of course, depending on the use and enjoyment of the yacht within or outside the European territory, stem from the Panama Papers investigations. And as we may understand, the situation determined and an environment absolutely not sensitive to the needs of the market as an industry because of this origin. An investigation on tax evasion behind a tax paradise triggered an in-depth analysis on inappropriate practices, which triggered in their turn a specific suspicious focus on the regimes used to mitigate VAT on the possession, on the use, on the enjoyment of yachts. So the request from the European Commission starting from this point was then the adoption of systems based solely on the principles of effectiveness and of burden of proof instead of the presumptive flat rate procedures we had to determine the part of the service carried out outside the European territory. And this means in practice from the European Commission the request to the countries, among them Italy, to strike out, to remove the flat rates that have so far allowed the market to attract yachts charters despite the application of VAT on top of the charter fees following the 2010 Sino Charter decision, because we cannot forget that 10 years ago we didn't have the VAT on top of the charter fee. So it is really a big change. The change required through an infringement procedure to Italy is to yacht charters and does not affect by itself yacht lease. But let's go to the Italian answer to this request. Italy's strategy and response to the pressure by the European Commission started last December with the 2020 Italian budget law that put the entry into force of the new rules on the 1st of April. Then we had other steps until the 1st of April. Nothing happened because also of the COVID-19 emergency. Only in May, a super short public consultation arrived from the Italian tax authority, And June 15, the implementing measures were published and entered into force for all the agreements signed from June 15 on. The simplification decree moved again the entry into force of the new rules and fixed the term, which is now November 1st, and included in the legal change not only charter agreements but also lease agreements, asking to stop the application of the flat rates. After this law amendment, two interpretive documents, resolution number 47 issued in August and resolution number 62 issued end of September, stated that the flat rates are allowed for all the agreements signed before November 1st. And this takes place for yacht charters and for lease agreements. So if we have a yacht charter agreement or a lease yacht lease agreement signed before November 1st, we will be allowed to apply the flat rates. It is not really important now to concentrate on the single steps of these recent law and interpretive amendments, and also on their consistency with the juridical rules and principle, or about their appropriateness to the context in each single moment, because this was the necessary response given by Italy to a request to make the legal framework and interpretive framework consistent with the directive. And what the Commission, the European Commission, is asking is to limit the tax benefit and the reduction of the tax basis to the time spent by the yacht outside Europe, and to this time calculated on the basis of the time actually spent outside the European territory. This, in principle, is not impossible to be done, but even if the implementing measures were issued on June 15 with regards to the charter agreements, and obviously not with regards to the lease agreements, because the lease agreements entered in this change later the implementing measures were issued, there are really relevant doubts on the application of the new rules, because the problem is that we are really able to follow the movement of yachts within or outside the European territory, and we know that there are very skilled providers able to give us the track record about this movement. But what the European Commission does not determine, and our implementing measure does not point out, is if in this new ratio we have to consider only the time spent while the yacht navigates, or the overall time spent by the yacht during the charter or the lease agreement. And there is a huge difference among the two cases, because
okay. You have to forgive me. I am going to have to stop you, because
yes, it fails to be, but what we hope we will be able to have from the tax authority is to be sure if we can consider just the navigation, and this could be really important because if not, the figures, in particular for the lease agreement, would be crazy. And the suggestion we are giving to the tax authority about the consideration of a new VAT rate, confirming that for charters, the reduced tax rate provided for by our law provisions for the hotel and other similar services can be applied for charters, as it has been stated recently for marinas. So
okay,
I think
Carla, let's just move on quickly to Janet, okay? And then if need be, we'll continue. Thank you. Janet.
So I'll try to be short. So first, short-term charters. So despite the fact that new measures are supposed to be implemented starting of 1st of November in Italy, and the infringement procedures made against Italy, Malta, Cyprus, there's nothing official yet for France. We were expecting some new news starting from 1st of April, but due to the COVID, the French authorities have decided to postpone until further notice. Though we have some hints about what these new measures should be, if and when they are implemented, because there were an administrative circular published in January 2020 with the aim actually to consult with the yachting industry. So what we know is that when these new regulations will be implemented, the fixed lump sum reduction applicable on the charters in order to determine actually the VAT rate applicable to the charter fees will no longer be applicable. All the charters made outside of EU waters, of course, will not be subject to VAT. It's time and not distance which shall be chosen in order to assess actually the reduction of the taxable basis. Then there was a question as well about what kind of means actually supportive documentation should be given in order to prove the proportional reduction of the taxable basis linked to the time spent outside. Well, the AIS, the yachts which are equipped with AIS technology, of course, which this will be the preferred means of control. For the yachts which are below 15 meters or which are not equipped, then any other means shall be accepted. But of course, we wait to see what this means will be. And as well, there should be a new cut-off date, as there was before. So there will be no retroactive effect. But of course, these are suppositions, so we wait to see what will be the official text if and when it's implemented. Then what I think, and we had a discussion about that, is that when these new measures will be applicable, the thing is that I think that this will have an impact on the commercial yachts which are operating under the French Commercial Exemption. So quick refresher for maybe those who are not familiar with the French Commercial Exemption. A yacht in France and in Monaco can be acquired or imported in exemption of VAT. But if this yacht comply with 6 cumulative conditions. So first condition is commercial yachts, commercial registration, permanent crew, yachts be over 15 meters in length, more than 70% of the trips made during a year shall be made outside of French territorial waters, and we'll see that this is where the problem will probably lie, and more dynamic than static charters. When I say that, I think that the new rules will have an impact on the French commercial exemption, is that mainly this is relating to the 70% ratio. Because what we have to understand is that the 70% rule lies on the owner, while the fact that yachts were going outside of French territorial waters, this was linked actually to the itinerary of the yacht, while the yacht is under control of the charterer and not the owner.
And the VAT impact on the charterer. So
exactly,
that is
until now, there was a real interest for charterers to go outside of French territorial waters, meaning international waters or in other countries, mainly international waters. But if now actually going and see the dolphin, sorry for the expression, but 10 minutes to have a reduction in VAT and come back, if you compare the fuel cost with the savings on the VAT, I mean, there's no point in doing so anymore. So I think that
interesting analogy that you make, right, between the VAT on the charters, which is the charterer's expense, and the benefits of the French Commercial Exemption, which is an exemption on the owner on VAT on refits, repairs, fuel, etc. So there's this correlation, which is going to be quite interesting. I just wanted to, sorry, Janet.
Quick thing. The thing is that this will mainly affect small yachts. We cannot go in international waters or go in other countries, and also yachts which do not do the double season, because yachts doing the double season in the Caribbean then don't prob at all. They will still be able to do the 70%. So quickly, what impact this will have is that these yachts which do not comply with the 70% rule anymore will not be able to consider as exempt yachts. This will have mainly two implications: VAT on the hull, which theoretically shall be due, and VAT on the supplies and the work, meaning that these owning companies will operate like in the normal system, meaning paying VAT and ask for recovering, or be able to deducting the VAT in the VAT returns. But of course,
it might see more yachts coming to Malta, perhaps.
It will.
And to be just, I need to slide this in here very quickly. A very important development with regard to commercial yachts in Malta this summer, despite all the craziness around us, is that there have been two very important developments. The first of which is that the setting up of a bank guarantee is no longer required if the importing entity is a Maltese entity. So that is, of course, a huge advantage to owners, because it removes one of the requirements, the bureaucratic requirements of obtaining a bank guarantee from a financial institution, although it is only for 4 months. So that is definitely something which we have seen has greatly assisted in seeing a greater number of yachts come in this period. And the second advantage is that when it is not a Maltese company, the value of the required bank guarantee has been reduced. So rather than 20% of the VAT due, we are now looking at 0.75% of the value. So again, there is then the advantage of having a reduced amount being put up as security to allow the deferment on importation. I mean, we all know that this is a procedure that is done to ensure that the yacht is duly imported and accounted for in Malta, but we have found that it has been greatly welcomed by practitioners and by owners. So that's something that I wanted to put in. And thank you, Janet, for joining in the third point to your answer, which...
A second thing, Malta for sure probably will gain about that, but also I think that more yachts maybe will use the reverse charge mechanism. So to be imported under the reverse charge mechanism, which they will pay claim on the hull, but then they will pay and ask the reimbursements for the supply, the works, and yeah.
Of course, then it depends if an importation is required or if a reverse charge would be best suited. So again, the good thing is there will be different options for different types of deliveries, and we can work together to give them the best option. I don't know, John, if we should go for the Q&A, because I'm conscious of time now. So
I think that we have a couple of questions. I think that Janet has to...
Long-term lease, I have not mentioned anything about that, but because we have no time, no real news. So French leasing scheme, Monaco long-term bareboat rental plan are still available, though if we considered the technology available, as we said, the IS and all the rest, and the infringement procedures made against Malta, Italy, and Cyprus, we think that this will be challenged in the near future as well, because up to now it's possible if owners, if leasees are not able to assess the real time they spend outside, to still use the 50% lump sum reduction in order to calculate the VAT applicable on the lease installments. I'm over.
Just since you mentioned Malta on the use and enjoyment, as you know, the authorities had, of course, withdrawn the famous leasing structure in 2018 at the end. And since then, we have new guidelines in place, which are based exactly on, as you and Carla explained, on the principle of actual calculation of time outside the EU. So as regards Malta, we have a clear delineation of where the authorities have gone further to the discussions with the Commission. And these calculations are put in place in the context of operating leases. So it is something that is being applied, and it is something which provides a tangible benefit to clients, depending on the use of the yacht, of course. John, sorry, I know I asked you to intervene and then we sort of ignored you.
No, that's quite all right. It's you know, it's a fascinating discussion, so it's hard to find a place to pause. I think that we have a couple of questions that have come in, so I want to be able to do justice to those questions. So maybe just to really quickly kick off, this one's for Janet. So are there any simplified export formalities for new builds that are being exported? Is there a way to avoid touching a third country port?
Yeah, actually, this is still available in France. I think maybe Carla will explain if there's any difference in Italy. But in France, this is still available for new builds. Still possible to place these yachts immediately under temporary admission without touching a third country port. When yachts are sold to non-EU company and registered under non-EU flags, and of course are ultimately owned by non-EU residents.
Fantastic.
I can confirm that there is a circular issued by the customs in Italy allowing this practice, which is commonly used by the customs office. I know that sometimes there have been issues on the recognition of this procedure in some way, but in general, we didn't face problems with the customs.
Okay, and actually, Carla, this is maybe something that falls into your remit. However, it is for the panel. So, if an Italian individual were to sell a VAT-paid yacht to a UK company after the 31st of December, would the transaction be at risk to a new VAT taxation by the UK HMRC under the form of a custom duty? Which is very specific. So, I mean, if that person is...
I believe that these should be dealt with consideration of the rules, the incoming rules on the situation. I read the different articles on this and different opinion on this situation, and we didn't share our comments with the central customs in Italy. So maybe this should be reviewed in some time.
Okay, great. There's a question that's come in for Alison, actually,
yes.
around Malta. This is a little bit outside of our remit, so Alison, I'm not sure how much you will be able to answer this, but the question is, what is the latest position on Transport Malta's cyber attack? Almost one month ago now, which I understand led to them losing much of their data, but are they still able to carry out their operations as they always have?
Well, yes, that is of course a very unusual occurrence and an already very unusual backdrop at the moment. Of course, the authorities are working very hard to ensure that all services are up and running as they were before. It is only transcripts that are not being released at the moment, so sales and purchases of vessels can still take place and are being registered. It is only when transcripts are required that there would be, of course, something that we need to hold on to it for the time being. So we are obviously following the space very closely, and unfortunately, I cannot at this moment in time give an indication of when everything will be up and running again. We are obviously checking out on a daily basis with the authorities, but definitely they're working very hard to find out what's happening. You said, the question said that all data was lost. That is not something that has been said or verified or by any means. I mean, of course, there is an investigation, and it's important that all the necessary steps are followed to understand what happened and ensure that all data is adequately protected. So
that's great. Thank you for clearing that up. That was very, very helpful. And then maybe one final question to the group, which is kind of a, kind of high level question, but how can the super yacht industry reduce the administrative burden for owners by developing a standard EU approach to VAT on charters?
This is something we've been discussing for 14 years. I don't think we can do it in a minute.
There are efforts to join the forces, to work with the and I can say that the MIBA is working on it and is taking a present part on in the dialogue with the single tax authorities. For example, MIBA participated to the public consultation for the new rules for VAT on charters in Italy and in France with a common approach, for example. And I believe that this is the new trend we have to follow and support as much as we can in the different countries. And I'm talking about also for my colleagues, we work in this view in the different countries. And I leave it to your comments what you want to add to my.
Well, I would say that if the lump sum flat reduction is over, then it will be easier to go towards that sense, because then it means that full VAT rate will be applicable. And if all countries choose time rather than distance, then it will be much easier to have an harmonized approach. Then the real mess and what it was very difficult is that until as long as the flat rate was available, but not in all the countries, but in France and in Italy, Malta had another approach, Croatia had another VAT rate, all the countries had their own system, which made it quite difficult for people to understand, what they had to do. But if now, following the infringement procedure, slowly, all countries start to have the same approach, at the end, we'll see that the majority of charters, full VAT rate will be applicable. I would say most of the time, especially for the traditional yachts, which we see here doing the Monaco and Saint-Tropez trip. It will be difficult, to have any reduction.
Okay, yeah. And Alison?
Yes, definitely I agree with what Carla and Janet said, and that, as I said before as well, we are moving towards a tangible quantification of movement, clearly. So although France and Italy are still applying flat rates to long-term charters and long-term leases, I think the move is very much towards having a level playing field, and so far as actually calculating time. I don't agree with Janet on a small point that even before we had a level playing field, we used to apply a percentage to the presumed length, of time, which then led to different VAT rates because we all have different VAT rates in our jurisdictions. It's just a technicality, but it's because, and I say it because we argued very hard with the Commission on that point. But yes, I think there is a measurement in place. I think that it will benefit some yacht owners and it might not be so relevant to others, as Janet very correctly said, depending on the area of navigation. But I think that it's a solution which has taken time to evolve, even a time for the industry to adapt, and there will be some more adjusting to do, but I think we're there now.
All right. Well, I think that's all that we have time for. So thank you so much for taking us through all of that. That was very, very engaging. And Alison, thank you very much for playing kind of, moderator / traffic director.
Always a pleasure, John. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful host.
And thank you to the audience for tuning in and sticking with us throughout this event, and also for all the great questions that got sent. And I'm glad that we got to have them all participated in. So for everybody in the audience and for the panelists, we're going to have this video replay available on our website probably later on today, if not if not tomorrow morning. And we will see you all at our next event. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Ciao, ciao.